From time to time, in various gay lesbian related publications, I read articles focusing on how to fight the religious right, those groups who align themselves in opposition to gays and lesbians, and many other groups as well, for reasons of spiritual or philosophical belief. The Ku Klux Klan is another example of a group identified primarily by what it opposes. During the Cold War years, it seems that a large part of American identity was our opposition to the Soviet Union. When we identify ourselves by who our enemies are or who we believe them to be, rather than by our own characteristics and accomplishments, we do more damage to ourselves than to those we oppose. Rather than orienting our lives around loving attitudes of giving and growing, invisible walls go up around us, walls constructed of fear and hatred. Ultimately, our armor becomes our prison, something that keeps us from doing the beautiful things of which we are capable. A beautiful garden is not created by hastily pulling out all the weeds, but rather by patiently planting more flowers. And there begins a wonderful metaphor to explore. Jesus used the allegory, the metaphor, the subject, I guess, of seeds and flowers and plants growing a lot in the parables and things that he told. And I recall the one about the 4 different types of seeds and how they wound up in all these different types of soils. And that's such a wonderful metaphor for life. In all the different situations I've been in, there have been people who, they had all sorts of different things they were interested in, all sorts of different people that they were. You know, some were, I suppose, a marigold, others might have been a cactus, others might have been a jade plant, something without spines but that survives drought well. All these different types of people, like all these different types of plants, each one growing in its own way, its own shape, according to its own design, not according to someone else's dictates. But like the parable of the 4 different types of seeds that Jesus told, people have a tendency to send roots, shall we say, down into a wide variety of different things. I know of friends of mine who, for whatever reason, have sent down roots into what you might call very rocky and unhealthy soil. Perhaps some type of addiction. I've had a couple different friends who were alcoholics. I guess they would be like a plant that I think they were designed to be something beautiful, but in putting their roots into a soil that was filled with rocks, perhaps one that was very barren of nutrients, perhaps like where I live in the mountains. I live in Colorado in the mountains, and there's a lot of areas near our house where mining was done in the past, which would all be all well and good, except that mining tends to process the soil so harshly that by the time they get done, what's left over is so sterilized nothing will grow in it. It's this barren, sandy, gravelly kind of stuff that just nothing will grow in it. There's areas near our house that have been barren for years, and anytime people have tried to plant trees there, they die because there's just nothing good in it. But we need to be conscientious of where we're putting down our roots. If we're like plants, there needs to be good, healthy soil. We need to be conscious. God has given us brains to think about what in the world we're doing. There's got to be some good soil that we can put our roots down into. We have to think about the things that make for a good foundation, a good place to put down your roots, something that will give you strength and the nutrients you need to grow taller and stronger and become the person you're meant to be. There's the bad things in the soil, the addictions, the preoccupations. One real common one I find is people's unwillingness to be honest with themselves. And I know what a struggle that is, and yet it's so important. In one sense, growth is growth, and all growth is hard, because if I took the very best potting soil and put the very best plant in it and set it out on my porch, if I lived in Denver, that plant would have to be wary of spring hailstorms. Anyone who lives down in the city of Denver or the surrounding communities knows what a hailstorm can do to plants outside in the spring. It's just a force of nature. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with the plant or anything's wrong with the soil. It's just something that happens. If where I live up in the mountains, it wouldn't be so much hail as the summers get very, very dry and very hot. If I took a plant from inside and moved it outside without acclimating it bit by bit, putting it out for a few minutes each day for gradually longer and longer times, it'd be burned up the first day because the sun is so intense. But that's another natural force. So it's not just the good soil. We can have the good soil, we can be a good plant, and still there are going to be forces that we have to contend with just as a normal part of life. If we face these honestly, I think we make it through. I know of people who will do anything to keep from dealing with things honestly because it's uncomfortable, it doesn't feel good. One example might be, even where I grew up in the Midwest, there was a lot of hailstorms. Suppose there was a plant there that was a Midwestern type plant, but it didn't like hailstorms, so it was moving to where there were no hailstorms. Okay, fine, we move the plant to where there's no hailstorms, somewhere, say, Arizona. No hailstorms, okay. Not out in the middle of a desert, I'm imagining. But what you wind up with is soil that the plant wasn't designed to grow in. It would have been better, I think, to be honest about the situation, to say, this is where I am, this is what I'm dealing with. And I think because God exists, there needs to be a recognition of the wisdom that if I was put here, somewhere inside of me, I have the strength and the wisdom to deal with whatever is confronting me. I might not know what it is at the moment, but I know that I haven't been stuck into a situation that is truly beyond me. I guess that's another one of my personal beliefs, I guess, that God would not put us in a place simply to destroy us. But it's like a plant I have at home that I've had for a very long time. It's a dwarf umbrella tree. When I first got it, I don't think it was much bigger than one of these. But at the moment, I think we're just about up to 4 feet tall. It's about 15 or 20 years old now. But problem with it being, shall we say, a softer kind of plant is that I could put it near a window and it would grow like crazy, and then it would fall over because it would reach for the light so hard, wanted the light right now, that in reaching for it, it wouldn't develop any of the backbone, any of the spine, any of the strength it needed to stand, to remain. It was in a hurry to get to the light without doing the preliminaries. So I would have to keep pruning it back, and pruning it back, and pruning it back to keep it from growing ahead of itself, getting too ambitious and too excited about things. And now it's 15 to 20 years old, and it stands by itself with no stakes or anything, and it's big. and it developed a trunk. But if I had left it to itself, it'd be a mess. You know, I think sometimes God's that way with our lives too, that there are all these things we want now. And when you're way down at this level, it's real hard to see that you're not all you need to be to reach to that height. So you start small. And God reminds you that we're going to take this slow. We're going to do this a little at a time. And in the end, you're going to get there. But you've got to be patient. And from time to time, there's going to be a little pain because we've got to do a little pruning. Another slogan I heard, at least half a dozen times while I was growing up, I think, relating to the same sort of issue about reaching out and thinking, if I can just get to there. The slogan goes, bloom where you're planted. And I think there is something to the idea that God put us where we are in the families we are for a reason. I don't know that I'm often as thankful for my family as I should be. But I think if I really believe God exists, there must be a reason for it. That there must be something I need to learn from them and something they need to learn from me. And somehow we're supposed to stay in contact for that reason and not just say, you go your way and I go mine. But there have been a lot of times in my family that I guess I didn't really appreciate. You know, and going back to the metaphor of plants, I recall when we were kids, we had this huge vegetable garden. At least I thought it was huge. I suppose if I went back and looked at it now, it wouldn't seem all that big. But I guess when you're only 9 and 10 years old, it can seem really big. But we'd have to be out there weeding it in the summer, and we hated weeding. And my mother always wanted to plant rows and rows and rows and rows of beans, and I hated beans. I like them now. But, which I guess makes it interesting that as time has gone on, things have gotten kind of reversed. That what I didn't like before, now I kind of enjoy. I guess I didn't learn to appreciate it. And perhaps in a sense that's like my dwarf umbrella tree at home, that at the time I'm sure it didn't appreciate being pruned, and yet it's a much healthier plant for it. Another plant I trimmed a lot were my jade plants, because it's another one that tends to get so heavy if it's left to grow to itself that it can't stand up. I guess looking at the bigger picture, which I guess is what I always try to come back to. Picture of the human race. There's so many things we're reaching for right now, and so many ways that we're changing so fast. I don't know, we want to build a city in outer space. That idea has been kicking around for a while, I guess. Some of our science fiction movies talked about cities on the moon and what have you. And yet, there's so many things we haven't quite ironed out here on Earth yet. You know, it's good that the moon is there, and someday we'll be there too, but there's so many things we need to figure out here. And I guess because of that, I'm glad that God prunes us back from time to time and says, no, wait, you've got to deal with this first. You can't run away from it. Just like the flower can't run away from this pot now until I move it. It's here, it's rooted. And here it will stay till I move it. You know, and there's a sense in which God roots each of us to who we are. And it's only in being honest about who we are that we're finally given the opportunity to move beyond that. One particular person at the moment, I guess I'm very concerned about, where this is really an issue, I think. It's like, the more the flower grows out, trying to get away from the pot, the more that's exactly where it's rooted. The more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess. But more than that, it has to do with part of who the flower is, are the roots under the ground. And you can never run away from that. Often on the show, I could come back to the point of saying, whoever and whatever you are, it's got to be okay. It's not for someone else to tell you, you can't be this particular kind of flower. Or you can't be that particular kind of flower. Or you have to grow this way. Or you have to behave like that. Not because any of the flowers made any choice in the matter. They simply are what they are. And not because any of the people made any choice in the matter. They simply are what they are. And whoever and whatever you are has to be okay. Because I think that's the way God meant it to be. But because of the interesting ways that society has developed, we have plants, flowers that have been people have tried to squish into different molds. And you wind up with a rather deformed looking flower. But when everyone around you is telling you this is the way to be, sometimes you want to do that. And you try very hard. But you're still planted here. And if the world tells you to be there, you reach as hard as you want, and there's still part of you that's there, and you'll never run away from that. And you'll never really be healthy until you grow from the place where you're planted. If this flower decided it wanted to be over here, I'd wind up with a horizontal flower, which would not be attractive, wouldn't be healthy, wouldn't be being itself in a beautiful way. And if I were the gardener, I'd prune it. But yeah, bloom where you're planted. Come from your own roots and stand tall and be yourself, because that was the beauty God made you to have. But there are the hard things, the hailstorms, the thunderstorms, the winters. I tried to imagine once what it must be like for the flowers in our garden at home to never, ever be inside of a house. You know, imagining the seasons going by, and the snow and the rain and the nights and the cold, and the deer that came along and ate off a bunch of them in the wintertime. And yet they survive, and how the world must be a very different experience for them. But somehow, for certain kinds of precious flowers, I think, all the hard things are so necessary. There's certain flowers, whether they need them or not, there's something about the hardness that makes them who they are. When fear and love were sown together, and there was life as we've never known, and fear prevailed, and love grew stronger, and the rose that bloomed It was forbidden, no love it is. Who could have known the price to pay for love like this? Oh, precious love that won't let go. As ages pass, I find at last the truth you know. When fear and love are sewn together, there is life as we've never known. And fear prevails, and love grows stronger, and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. The time is passing, will we forget the depth of love that fear reveals and the life that lives? Oh, precious love that won't let go. As ages pass, I find at last the truth you know. When fear and love are sewn together, there is life as we've never known. And fear prevails, and love grows stronger, and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. When fear and love are sewn together, and there is life we've never known, and fear prevails, and love grows stronger, and the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. And the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. And the rose that blooms will only bloom in the place of thorns. I had a favorite verse when I was young that I had in a piece of stained glass. I don't have it anymore, but if I remember right, it's the kiss of the sun for pardon, the song of the birds for mirth. One is nearer to God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. Bloom where you're planted and grow strong no matter what the challenges may be. Thank you for joining us. And now may you be blessed with love and peace in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen.